Imagine being taken away from your home in chains. Imagine never having new clothes to wear or enough food to eat or a real bed to sleep in. Imagine being forced to do back-breaking work every day, all day long, and never get paid. It's hard to imagine, but that was the experience for many enslaved African Americans for over 200 years. What was life like for enslaved men, women, and children? Let's find out. Hundreds of thousands of Africans were taken from their homes in Africa, put on ships, and brought to the British colonies in America. A trip on a slave ship was a terrifying experience. The trip took weeks or months with hundreds of people crammed below deck. The ceilings were so low that a person could not even sit up straight. Many Africans had their hands and ankles chained so that they couldn't move freely. Many didn't survive the voyage. In America, the captured African people were forced to become enslaved. An enslaved person is someone who is owned by and works without pay for another person. The life and experiences of an enslaved person varied and depended on where they lived and the type of work they did. The one thing that connected the lives of enslaved people was the law. The laws on slavery treated an enslaved person as a piece of property, which meant that enslaved people could be sold away from their family. Because enslaved people were viewed as property, they could be sold away from their families at any time. Many were sold at auctions. Auctions were advertised with posters to let people know the ship packed with enslaved people was about to arrive. At the auction, enslaved people would be forced to stand on a raised platform so they could be seen by the buyers. The buyer who bid the most money would then own the enslaved person. It was at the auctions where African families were split apart. Husbands, wives, and children went to different owners. Many never saw each other again. No event was more traumatic in the lives of enslaved people than the forcible separation from their families. Imagine how you would feel if you were taken away from your family. For most enslaved people, the most predictable and constant part of their lives was work. Many enslaved people began working when they were young and worked until they died. Some enslaved people worked in the master's home, serving as maids or cooks. The majority worked in the fields. Many worked on plantations or large farms in the South, growing cotton, tobacco, and sugar. Some of the most trusted enslaved people were made slave masters. They watched over the other workers in the field.
Boy, I know you ain't trying to slack off out here, is you?
No, sir. No, sir. No, sir.
Well, you better get to picking. Master says we got to get this cotton picked for sundown. Now get a move on.
Yes,
all of you.
Yes, sir, master. Yes, sir.
Well, I put the lash to you myself.
The growing of cotton was by far the chief occupation of Southern enslaved people. The hardest part of the year on a cotton plantation was harvest time. Picking cotton could be a difficult and painful job. Many enslaved people feared they would be punished for not picking enough. Most slavery laws required that enslaved people be given basic food, clothing, and shelter. Most enslaved people were forced to live in tiny, one-room, shoddily built cabins. Up to 10 people could live in one single hut. Many shared a cabin with another family. Sharing a cabin with another family interfered with family life and privacy. Long work hours made it hard for families to spend much time with each other. Inside the cabin, there was little furniture. Many people slept on beds made of straw or rags. Others slept on the floor. Owners would provide enslaved people with very little clothing. The clothing didn't fit well and was made of coarse, uncomfortable material. Enslaved people were given a weekly food allowance of perhaps some cornmeal, dried fish, and a little pork, but there was never enough to eat. Most enslaved people were allowed to plant small vegetable gardens for their personal use. Owners encouraged gardens because it allowed them to save on food rations. Most enslaved people ate 2 to 3 meals a day. The only hot meal was typically the evening meal, which was eaten at the living quarters. Corn cakes and pork rinds were a typical meal. Most enslaved people ate dinner without the comfort of tables or chairs. Enslaved people lived and worked under terribly difficult and horrid conditions, and they had no personal freedoms at all. Attempts to escape were common on southern plantations, but very difficult. Runaways had to keep out of sight of slave catcher patrols, plus the rugged conditions of the woods and swamps made the escape unpleasant and dangerous too. Planning an escape took months or years. Enslaved people created elaborate ways to secretly communicate information for making plans. Some information was found in songs. The lyrics in a song called "Follow the Drinking Gourd" provided directions on how to get north. The drinking gourd referred to the Big Dipper constellation and the bright North Star. Runaways would know to follow the North Star on their way to northern states and freedom. Abolitionists, or people opposed to slavery, began to organize a system for hiding and aiding runaway enslaved people, the Underground Railroad. The Underground Railroad helped escaped enslaved people on their treacherous journey to the free states in the North and Canada. The Underground Railroad was a series of homes, barns, and churches called stations. Stations were the places where runaways could hide. Runaways usually hid during the day. It was safer to travel under the darkness of night. They could recognize a station by brightly lit candles or lanterns positioned in windows or the front yard. There they knew they could find help. Working or traveling on the Underground Railroad was dangerous. Legally, enslaved people were not allowed to marry. Many, however, did choose mates and were married informally in small wedding ceremonies. One wedding custom many believe was carried over from African culture was jumping the broom. Religious services among enslaved people also varied. On many plantations, you could find African American preachers who would lead the religious ceremonies. These services, or religious meetings, were very important to many enslaved people because religion was a vital part of their life. Religious services also provided a time for enslaved people to get together, and it was a welcome break from the constant work they had to endure. When Africans were taken from their homes and their families split apart, the only thing the newly enslaved people had in common was their music. So music became an important part of an enslaved person's life, and that music tradition carried on for years. Many enslaved people sang while working in the fields under the hot sun. Initially, the main purpose of those songs was to make the work on the fields easier to endure. The songs were typically about the hardships of being an enslaved person in America. Very few enslaved people had any kind of formal education, so very few could read or write. However, African culture and folklore was carried on from one generation to another through storytelling. The stories of Brer Rabbit, a favorite story told to this day, originated in African folklore.
I have 3 things I need you to do for me. And he said, oh God, yes, I'll do those 3 things for a long tail. God said, okay, the first thing that I need you to do is I need you.
Storytelling helped keep African culture alive in America and was a relaxing form of entertainment. The life of an enslaved person was unimaginably harsh, difficult, and dangerous. It was a life millions of people endured over hundreds of years in America. But thanks to abolitionists, both black and white, and leaders like Abraham Lincoln, the fight for freedom and the abolition of slavery became a reality. The United States of America had finally lived up to its promise to be a nation where all men are created equal.